There's something extremely compelling about alternate history stories. They offer endless possibilities for portrayals of what could have been. So despite becoming increasingly common in recent years, each one of these alternate histories have something unique to offer. The most recent example of this in gaming is the world of Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart is set in a timeline where the USSR excelled in robotics and bioengineering in the 30s, and so managed to quickly put an end to the Second World War, and build a society where people are freed from manual labor and thus focus on scientific and artistic pursuits. Our story begins in 1955 and follows the protagonist, P3, as he tears his way through hordes of automatons set awry by a sabotaged neural network intended to control them. As a disclaimer, this game was significantly more suggestive than I had anticipated, so if you have any young children around, you may want to save this video for after they've been tucked in. So with that aside, let's get into it. Atomic Heart is a little bit Terminator and a little bit Bioshock. Actually, it's a lot of bit Bioshock, but unique in its design nonetheless. To be completely honest, I don't play too many first-person shooters, so the main draw of this game for me was actually its visual aesthetic. A combination of retrofuturism and the general design sensibilities of the 50s, in the context of a thriving USSR, introduces a setting seldom seen or even imagined. Contrasting the visual design of Atomic Heart is a protagonist with the vocabulary of a sailor, and an attitude reminiscent of stereotypical tough guy characters from the pre-2010s era of gaming. This game has two main types of environments: the interior facilities, which are more challenging due to the limited space for combat, and in my opinion, the much more appealing outdoors, which counterintuitively demands a higher level of stealth, as surveillance cameras could summon unending hordes of murderous machines, while still offering more opportunities to escape. The interior spaces are made up of interconnecting hallways and medium-sized, sometimes multi-leveled rooms. These facilities are littered with the corpses and wreckage caused by the revolting robots, and navigating them will require the player to leverage their stealth and combat abilities appropriately. Outside the facilities remains the impressive architecture and futuristic sky cities of a freshly eradicated civilization. All of this nestled neatly within the glorious vistas of the Kazakh mountains. I was pleasantly surprised to discover that the map was designed with a much more open-world approach, rather than being based solely on linear progression. The interior and exterior maps were separated by elevators acting as a loading screen. But the exterior map, in particular, was much larger and open than I would have expected from this type of game, allowing for much more exploration than I personally took advantage of. As has become the convention in open-world games, there were indeed towers from which you could access footage from the surrounding surveillance cameras, and even unlock various locations. These were occasionally used to access floating structures to then zipline into locked areas and testing grounds, much of which contains side content awarding blueprints for various weapon modifications. The combat in Atomic Heart is fairly typical of a first-person shooter, but is also complemented by some RPG elements that helps elevate the overall gameplay. There are various types of melee and ranged weapons, including your axe, handgun, shotgun, rocket launcher, and so on. All weapons can be crafted with materials acquired by defeating enemies and collecting loot, provided you have the blueprint for the weapon. Additionally, all weapons can be deconstructed without penalty or cost to reallocate the use of those materials. I only made use of this feature for the final boss, but had I realized the value of its utility much earlier, I would have used it more often to play around with more weapon types. I should also note that even the ammo and consumables in your inventory can be deconstructed and likewise crafted. As I mentioned, weapon parts can also be acquired and are used to upgrade or modify your weapons, and each of these parts are also upgradable. Some parts are better suited against specific enemy types, while others may offer some supplemental ability, like the spinning axe swing. Another aspect in which Atomic Heart uses RPG mechanics is in the character upgrades. As a human with cybernetic enhancements, P3 has access to various abilities to enhance his combat. Upgrades and crafting can be accessed in every save room via a terminal named Nora, which for a glorified soda fridge is immeasurably thirsty, and entirely intent on keeping you fully torqued.
relax and enjoy. Just promise you'll talk dirty to me again.
I am so gonna punch you.
Yes, yes! Punish me, master! I love dominant males.
Oh, gross.
There are 7 skill trees available to P3 to level up. Among them are 4 abilities, 2 of which can be mapped to L1 at any given time and toggled with the D-pad. A 5th ability called Shock is always equipped, and as the name suggests, allows you to shock enemies, oftentimes immobilizing them temporarily. Upgrading this ability will increase its strength, range, and number of affected enemies. The other abilities can similarly be upgraded. These abilities consist of Frostbite, allowing you to freeze enemies, Mass Telekinesis, allowing you to lift and suspend enemies in the air, Polymeric Jet, allowing you to spray volatile polymer at your enemies, which will significantly increase any elemental effects such as freezing, electricity, and fire. And finally, the Polymeric Shield, which allows you to block and even deflect enemy attacks. Aside from the ability upgrades, the remaining 2 skill trees are titled Character and Energy Management. Character upgrades will increase your health, damage resistance, dodge, inventory space, and so on. Energy management will allow you to increase your overall energy, increase its regeneration, and recycle lost health into energy in order to use energy weapons. Upgrades on the skill tree will progressively unlock as you play through the story, and as someone who doesn't play too many first-person shooters, this game really started to shine when I started unlocking more abilities and putting them all to use in fast-paced combat. As you would probably expect, there are several enemy types, some with multiple variants. The most common being the lab techs, with 3 variants. The vanilla model that will come at you with pure melee, and its variants that will either additionally wield an electrified baton and shield, or shoot laser beams out of its face. There are plenty of other types of robotic enemies, largely intended to be used for manual field labor or transportation, so a lot of them will be equipped with circular blade saws and scythes, while other ranged enemies may have originally been created for surveillance, repairs, or military use. Another enemy type I was not expecting to encounter in this game were organic enemies. As I mentioned at the start, in this timeline, the USSR had also excelled in bioengineering, and created something similar to the cordyceps in The Last of Us, or the Flood from Halo. So yes, the world of Atomic Heart is now afflicted by 2 of the worst types of man-made apocalypses, AI and zombies. However, the biological enemies are mainly restricted to certain parts of the interior environment, which is fine by me, because their designs are a little generic and play second fiddle to the robot designs. I'm far less intimidated by feeble reanimated lab nerds than I am this soulless dead-eyed scoundrel running at me full clip with murderous intent. The robot designs are what really makes this game feel unique. From Belyash the monkey-like labor bot, to the ballerina twins, each with a shiny metal ass that would make Bender weep.
Bite my shiny metal ass!
Many of the robots have a Jetsons-like appearance to them, but maintain a distinctive quality unique to Atomic Heart. As far as my criticisms go for Atomic Heart, they largely boil down to personal preference, as the game was surprisingly well made by AAA standards, and Atomic Heart was actually made by a relatively new studio. This was actually Mundfish's debut game. Despite this, I don't know if it warranted the increased price tag that some studios are now attempting to normalize for current-gen games. However, this game is available through Game Pass, so totally worth checking out that way. Otherwise, I would probably wait for a sale, as I will now be doing for the already confirmed DLC. Another thing worth mentioning is the voice acting. At the start of the game, it felt a little awkward, and P3 seemed comically naive.
Crispy critters, man.
But without spoiling anything, the naivety is not unintentional. And with regards to the voice acting, I generally have a rule to consume media in the language it was originally created. However, given that Atomic Heart doesn't waste its time with too many unnecessary cutscenes, most of the story is delivered through dialogue during gameplay. Because of this, I opted to play with English dialogue. But if you're someone who enjoys cinematic cutscenes as I do, boy does this game deliver. My final point of criticism is in the respawn points for some of the boss fights. These boss fights are tremendously fun and well designed. However, the bosses have very particular weaknesses, and if you went in unprepared, you likely will not be successful on your first try. For most bosses, you'll respawn right before the fight with a Nora machine to more adequately prepare. But a few of these bosses respawn you right at the start of the fight, so unless you load a previous save point, you're stuck with the equipment you've got. All told, I would recommend this game. It took a sizable chunk of the start of the game to get fully immersed, but once I started unlocking new abilities and getting comfortable with the gameplay, I had a really great time, and I'll probably return to it for the platinum. So now I'd like to hear from you guys. If you've played Atomic Heart, let me know in the comments if you'll be getting the DLC on launch, wait for a sale, or skip it altogether. If you haven't played it, does the style appeal to you, and do you think you'll give it a try through Game Pass or otherwise? If you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like, or dislike if you didn't. And as always, subscribing is much appreciated. I've been Punch and Phonk. Keep it funky, fellas.